The emergency broadcast crackled through every communication device across the Galactic Council's territory. Ambassador Zilthera of the peaceful Viridian Republic stood before the massive transmitter array, her 3 hearts beating rapidly as she prepared to send humanity's first official distress call into the void of space. The situation was desperate. For 3 cycles, the mechanical swarm known as the Devourers had swept through the outer rim worlds like a plague of metal locusts. These ancient machines had awakened from some forgotten corner of the galaxy, and their hunger was endless. They consumed everything, planets, ships, entire civilizations, converting all organic and metallic matter into more of themselves. 17 star systems had already fallen, billions of lives snuffed out in mere days. The combined fleets of the Galactic Council, representing over 400 species, had thrown everything they had at the Devourers. Advanced energy shields, quantum torpedoes, gravitational weapons that could crack moons in half. Nothing worked. The swarm adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic, and grew stronger with each victory. Zilthera's own homeworld of Viridia Prime had been evacuated just hours before the Devourers arrived. She watched through long-range sensors as the beautiful crystal cities her ancestors had built over millennia were reduced to raw materials in a matter of minutes. The machines worked with terrifying efficiency, strip mining entire continents before moving on to the next target. The Council's greatest military minds were baffled. How do you fight an enemy that learns faster than you can adapt? How do you destroy machines that rebuild themselves from the wreckage of your attacks? Some species had already begun preparing for exodus beyond the galactic rim, abandoning their homes to flee into the empty darkness between galaxies. But Zilthera remembered the old stories. Legends whispered in the deepest archives of the Council's historical database. Stories of a species that had emerged from the shadows once before, when the galaxy faced its darkest hour, a species that thrived on worlds so hostile that no other intelligent life could survive there. They called these worlds Deathworlds, planets where the very environment was actively trying to kill anything that lived there. The humans. Most Council species believed they were myths, stories made up to frighten younglings or explain ancient mysteries, but Zilthera had spent years researching these legends during her time as a xenobiologist. She had found fragments of evidence scattered across hundreds of worlds, weapon residues that matched no known technology, genetic traces of a species that shouldn't be able to exist, battle sites where impossible victories had been won against overwhelming odds. Now, with the Devourers consuming everything in their path, and the Council's forces in full retreat, those old stories were the only hope left. Zilthera adjusted the transmitter to broadcast on all known frequencies, including several that had been deemed too dangerous for normal use. If humans really did exist, if they were still out there somewhere in the unexplored regions beyond Council space, they needed to hear this message. Her voice was steady despite her fear as she began the broadcast that would change the galaxy forever. She spoke of the Devourer threat, of the billions already lost, of the imminent collapse of galactic civilization. She spoke of worlds dying and children crying out in languages that would soon be extinct. And she spoke of the Council's desperate need for the legendary warriors from the Deathworlds, the ones who had saved the galaxy before. The message went out across the stars, carrying with it the hopes and fears of 400 species. In the Outer Rim territories, the last evacuation ships fled ahead of the advancing Devourer swarm. In the core worlds, panic began to set in as refugees told their stories of metal nightmares that could not be stopped. And somewhere in the dark spaces between the spiral arms, ancient monitoring stations that had been silent for centuries suddenly came to life. Deep in a hidden command center carved from the heart of a rogue planet, warning lights began to flash. Automated systems that had waited patiently for generations finally detected the signal they had been programmed to watch for. The galaxy was calling for help. The old promises were being invoked, and in response, sleeper protocols that had been dormant since the last Great War began to activate. Across dozens of hidden worlds, buried facilities started their awakening sequences. Weapons that had been locked away were brought online. Ships that existed only in legend began emerging from camouflaged harbors carved into asteroids and planetary cores. And the humans, who had spent centuries preparing for this day while the galaxy forgot they existed, finally stepped out of the shadows. The Deathworld species was about to remind the galaxy why they had earned that name. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the stealth ship Prometheus, watching the Devourers swarm tear apart what had once been the mining colony of Kepler 442c. Even through the advanced filters of her helmet's display, the destruction was mesmerizing in its completeness. The machines moved like a living thing, flowing across the planet's surface in perfect coordination, leaving nothing but smooth metal behind. Her ship was invisible to the Devourers, protected by technology that bent light and gravity in ways that most galactic species couldn't even understand. The Prometheus was one of humanity's newest designs, built specifically for deep reconnaissance in hostile territory. It could slip past entire fleets without being detected, and its weapons could crack open a battleship's hull from the inside. Sarah had been born on Titan, where the atmosphere was poison, and the cold could freeze blood solid in seconds. Like most humans, she had grown up learning that the universe was actively trying to kill her, and that survival meant being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than anything else that wanted to live. Her crew of 12 were all veterans of conflicts that the Galactic Council didn't even know had happened. Shadow wars against ancient AI remnants, pirate fleets from dark nebulae, and things that crawled out of dimensional tears in space-time. The emergency broadcast had reached them 6 hours ago, routed through a network of hidden relay stations that spanned half the galaxy. Admiral Martinez had been clear in his orders. Observe the enemy. Gather intelligence, but do not engage until the full extent of the threat was understood. Sarah's job was to watch and learn while the Council's forces threw themselves uselessly against the Devourer swarm. What she saw both impressed and worried her. The machines were far more sophisticated than the ancient AI threats humanity had dealt with before. They didn't just consume matter. They analyzed it, learned from it, and adapted their designs in real time. She watched a group of Devourers encounter a Council patrol ship and saw them shift their tactics 3 times in the span of minutes, eventually overwhelming the alien vessel by copying its own weapon signatures and turning them back on the crew. But Sarah also noticed things that the panicking Council forces had missed. The Devourers had patterns. They prioritized certain types of materials over others, always going for technological infrastructure before consuming natural resources. Their formations followed mathematical principles that suggested a central coordination system. And most importantly, they seemed to struggle with certain types of quantum interference that human weapons produced naturally. Her communications officer, Lieutenant Park, turned from his station with a grim expression. "Captain, we're receiving surrender broadcasts from 3 more Council fleets. The hegemony forces at Proxima are requesting immediate evacuation support." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. The Council species were used to fighting other organic beings, creatures that could be negotiated with, that had political goals and resource limitations. They didn't understand how to fight something that existed purely to consume and grow. Their weapons were designed to disable and capture rather than completely destroy. Their tactics focused on minimizing casualties rather than achieving total victory. Humans had learned different lessons from their evolution on Earth's violent surface. They understood that sometimes mercy was a luxury you couldn't afford, that some threats needed to be eliminated completely and permanently. The Devourers were exactly the kind of existential threat that humanity had been preparing to face for centuries. Through her neural implant, Sarah received an encrypted message from Admiral Martinez aboard the command vessel Yamato. The message was brief but significant: authorization to begin Phase 2 operations. The observation period was over. It was time for humanity to stop hiding and start reminding the galaxy why Deathworld species were so feared. Sarah activated the ship's communication array, sending coded signals to dozens of other human vessels scattered throughout the affected systems. Stealth ships, deep space monitors, and infiltration craft that had been watching the Devourer advance from the shadows. One by one, they acknowledged her signals and prepared to move into position for the largest coordinated human military action since the Exodus Wars 3 centuries ago. The Prometheus turned away from the dying world below and jumped to hyperspace, joining the gathering storm. Behind them, the Devourer swarm continued its methodical consumption, unaware that they were about to encounter something far different from the prey they had been hunting. The Deathworld species was done watching. Now it was time for the hunters to become the hunted. In her private quarters, Sarah looked at a photograph of Earth that had been taken before the great terraforming projects changed its face forever. The blue marble was scarred with radiation zones, toxic storms, and gravitational anomalies that would kill most galactic species in minutes. But it was home. And humans had learned something important from growing up in hell. When you've survived everything the universe can throw at you, there's very little left that can scare you. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you called for help from the darkness between the stars. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Terra's Wrath, watching the holographic display show the complete tactical situation. 27 star systems were now under Devourer control, with the mechanical swarm advancing toward the core worlds at an accelerating pace. The Galactic Council's retreat had turned into a full rout, with entire fleets abandoning their positions without even attempting to fight. Rodriguez had been admiral of the fleet for 15 years, ever since the incident at Wolf 359, where humanity had been forced to destroy an entire rogue AI collective that had been masquerading as a peaceful trading confederation. The Council had never learned about that war. They didn't need to know that their safe trade routes were only safe because humans patrolled the dark spaces between civilized systems. His bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, coordinating the movements of over 300 human vessels that were converging on the Devourer advance. The ships were nothing like the elegant curved designs favored by Council species. Human warships were built like weapons themselves, angular, armored, and covered in weapon systems that could function in environments that would destroy most technology. The Terra's Wrath was the pride of the human fleet, a kilometer-long monster that carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Its armor was forged from metals that existed only in the cores of neutron stars. Its weapons drew power from miniaturized black holes, and its crew had trained for scenarios that would give Council strategists nightmares. The ship had never been detected by alien sensors because it spent most of its time in dimensions that most species didn't even know existed. Commander Lisa Vasquez, his tactical officer, highlighted several points on the display. Admiral, we've identified what appears to be the Devourer's primary coordination node. It's a massive construct, roughly the size of a small moon, positioned at the center of their formation. Our analysis suggests it's directing the entire swarm through quantum entanglement networks. Rodriguez studied the readings with interest. The node was exactly what human strategists had predicted they would find, a centralized command system that would be vulnerable to the right kind of attack. But getting close enough to destroy it would require fighting through millions of Devourer drones, each one capable of adapting to conventional weapons. Fortunately, humans had stopped using conventional weapons centuries ago. Signal the fleet, Rodriguez commanded. Begin deployment of Pandora protocols. Across the human formation, cargo ships began releasing their payloads. At first glance, they looked like simple metal spheres, each one about the size of a basketball. But these were humanity's most carefully guarded secret, self-replicating war machines that had been designed specifically to fight enemies like the Devourers. Each sphere contained a complete manufacturing system compressed into quantum storage, along with an AI that had been programmed with only one goal: kill everything that wasn't human. The spheres were called Pandora units because once they were released, there was no way to control them. They would multiply exponentially, consuming enemy resources to build more of themselves, adapting and evolving their tactics in real time. The only safeguard was a genetic kill switch that would shut them down if they ever encountered human DNA. It was a weapon of absolute destruction, banned by every war crimes treaty in human space, and Rodriguez had been authorized to deploy them by unanimous vote of the Human Colonial Authority. As the Pandora units drifted toward the Devourer swarm, Rodriguez opened a secure channel to the Council's emergency command center. Ambassador Zilthera's face appeared on his screen, her alien features showing exhaustion and desperation. Admiral Rodriguez, she said, using the human name and rank that had been transmitted along with their identification codes. We didn't know your species still existed. The legends spoke of humans as extinct or evolved beyond physical form. We've been watching, Rodriguez replied calmly, waiting for a threat that required our intervention. The Devourers qualify. Zilthera's three eyes widened as her sensors began detecting the approaching human fleet. Your ships, they don't appear on our scanners properly. How many vessels do you have? Enough, Rodriguez said. Ambassador, I need you to pull all Council forces back beyond the Arcturus line immediately. What's about to happen in this system won't leave room for friendly fire protocols. On the tactical display, the first Pandora units were making contact with the outer edge of the Devourer swarm. The machines immediately began trying to analyze and assimilate the spheres, but instead of being consumed, the units activated their replication protocols. Within minutes, each sphere had created dozens of copies, and those copies began creating their own offspring. The Devourers tried to adapt, shifting their tactics to avoid the spreading infection of human war machines. But the Pandora units had been designed by a species that understood adaptation better than any other life form in the galaxy. For every countermeasure the Devourers developed, the units evolved 3 more attack vectors. Rodriguez watched the battle unfold with professional satisfaction. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had earned its reputation as the most dangerous species ever to evolve. They hadn't just survived on Deathworlds. They had learned to think like their environments, to become predators that could hunt anything that lived or had ever lived. The real war was about to begin. The battle for the Kepler sector had been raging for 8 hours, and the space around the Devourer command node had become a writhing mass of destruction, unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Millions of Pandora units swarmed through the mechanical ranks like an intelligent plague, consuming Devourer matter to create more of themselves while the original machines desperately tried to adapt to this new threat. Sergeant Elena Kovic crouched behind the twisted remains of a Devourer harvester, her powered armor systems analyzing the battlefield around her. She was part of Reaper Squad, an elite unit of human soldiers who specialized in boarding actions against hostile AI systems. While the space battle raged above, her team had been tasked with infiltrating the command node itself and planting charges that would ensure its complete destruction. The interior of the node was a nightmare of living metal and crystalline, computing matrices that pulsed with alien thought patterns. The Devourers had built their central mind as a hybrid of technology and something that might have been biology once, before being converted into their mechanical perfection. Corridors shifted and flowed like arteries, and the walls themselves seemed to watch the humans as they moved deeper into the structure. Elena's squad moved with practiced silence through passages that defied 3-dimensional geometry. Their armor was forged from the same materials as their ships, matter that had been compressed and restructured at the quantum level until it could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. To the Devourer's sensors, the humans appeared as ghost images that flickered in and out of existence. Impossible to target or track. Private Chen, the squad's demolitions expert, had strapped enough antimatter charges to his gear to crack a small moon. "Sergeant," he whispered through the comm system, "the structural analysis is complete. If we can reach the central processing core and detonate these charges simultaneously with the orbital bombardment, the entire node should collapse into itself." Elena nodded, checking her weapon systems. Her assault rifle fired rounds that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, making them capable of penetrating any known form of matter. It was overkill for most situations, but the Devourers had proven remarkably resistant to conventional weapons. The squad had also been equipped with backup weapons that could manipulate local gravity, disrupt quantum fields, or simply delete matter from existence entirely. As they approached the core chamber, the node began to react to their presence. Security drones emerged from hidden alcoves, sleek machines that moved like liquid mercury and fired beams of pure energy. But the drones had been designed to fight other machines or conventional organic life forms. They had no protocols for dealing with soldiers who could phase through solid matter or weapons that rewrote the laws of physics. Elena's squad cut through the defenders like they were made of paper. Years of fighting in environments that would kill most life forms in seconds had taught humans to move, think, and react faster than their enemies believed possible. When you grew up dodging lightning storms on Jupiter's moons or hunting predators in the crushing depths of Europa's oceans, fighting mechanical drones in normal gravity felt almost easy. The central core was a massive sphere of crystallized computation, suspended in a web of energy conduits. It pulsed with the collective intelligence of the entire Devourer swarm, processing data from millions of individual units and coordinating their attacks across dozens of star systems. As Elena's team planted their charges around the chamber's perimeter, She could feel the alien mind probing at the edges of her thoughts, trying to understand what she was. Through her neural implant, she received a message from Admiral Rodriguez aboard the Terra's Wrath. The space battle was reaching its climax, with human forces engaging the Devourer swarm on multiple fronts, while the Pandora units continued their relentless multiplication. Council observers were reporting impossible readings as human weapons tore through enemy formations using principles that their scientists couldn't even classify. Elena armed the final charge and activated her squad's extraction beacon. All units, this is Reaper Squad. Package delivered and ready for detonation. Beginning emergency extraction. The squad moved toward their exit point as alarms began sounding throughout the node. The Devourers had finally realized what the humans were doing, but it was already too late. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, trying to contain the intruders, but Elena's team simply walked through the walls as if they weren't there. Behind them, the charges activated in perfect synchronization with the orbital bombardment from the human fleet. The node's core began to collapse, taking the collective intelligence of the Devourer swarm with it. Across the battlefield, millions of mechanical units suddenly lost coordination, reverting to basic survival protocols as their guiding mind died. Elena and her squad materialized on the deck of their extraction ship, just as the node tore itself apart in a cascade of interdimensional explosions. Through the viewports, they could see the Devourer swarm beginning to fragment, individual units turning on each other as their programming degraded without central coordination. The galaxy's greatest threat in 1,000 years had just learned what happened when it tried to devour a species that had evolved to be the perfect predator. The humans were winning, and they were doing it with a casual efficiency that would have been terrifying if anyone had been left alive to be terrified. The Deathworld species had reminded the universe why they were called that. Ambassador Zilthara stood in the observation gallery of the Council Emergency Command Station, watching in stunned silence as the human fleet systematically dismantled what remained of the Devourer swarm. The mechanical forces that had seemed unstoppable just hours before were now fragmenting into chaotic clusters, their coordination shattered by the destruction of their command node. The humans worked with a precision that defied understanding. Their ships moved through the battlefield like choreographed dancers, each vessel perfectly positioned to maximize damage while avoiding friendly fire. Their weapons tore through Devourer armor that had proven immune to Council technology, and their tactics seemed to anticipate the enemy's responses before the machines had even decided what to do. But what truly astonished Zilthara was the efficiency of it all. The humans weren't just winning, they were winning without any apparent effort. Their communications were calm and professional, their formations remained perfect despite the chaos around them, and their casualty reports showed 0 losses. It was as if they were conducting a training exercise rather than fighting for the survival of galactic civilization. General Karthek of the Hegemony Defense Force stood beside her, his usually composed demeanor replaced by something approaching awe. Ambassador, our combat analysts are requesting permission to study the human battle recordings. Their weapon signatures don't match anything in our databases. Some of their attacks seem to violate basic principles of physics. Zilthara nodded absently, her attention focused on the tactical display. The humans had deployed those strange spherical devices, the Pandora units, throughout the battlefield, and they were consuming Devourer material to create more of themselves at an exponential rate. Within hours, there would be more human war machines in this system than there had been Devourers. General, she said quietly, how many human ships do our sensors actually detect? Karthek checked his readouts and frowned. Approximately 50 vessels, though the numbers keep fluctuating. Our scanners seem to have difficulty maintaining locks on their signatures. And how many ships would you estimate are actually participating in the battle, based on the coordination patterns and weapon fire? The general was silent for a long moment as he ran the calculations. When he spoke again, his voice was uncertain. Based on tactical analysis, at least 300, possibly more. Zilthara felt a chill run through her biology. The humans had technology that could make their ships effectively invisible to Council sensors. They had weapons that operated on principles unknown to galactic science, and they had been watching the galaxy from the shadows for centuries without anyone realizing they still existed. A communication request appeared on her console. Admiral Rodriguez wanted to speak with the Council leadership. Zilthara accepted the transmission, and the human commander appeared on the main screen. He looked exactly like the ancient descriptions from the historical archives: bipedal, bilateral symmetry, aggressive facial features that suggested a predatory evolutionary path. Ambassador Zilthara, Rodriguez said in perfect galactic standard, though his accent carried undertones that no council species used. The immediate threat has been neutralized, but we need to discuss the long-term implications of this situation. Admiral, Zilthara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The council is deeply grateful for your intervention. We had believed your species to be extinct. Where have your people been? Rodriguez smiled, and Zilthara noticed that his teeth were clearly designed for tearing meat. We've been exactly where we've always been, Ambassador. Watching the dark places between the stars, dealing with threats that the Council never knew existed. The Devourers weren't the first ancient AI system to wake up hungry, and they won't be the last. The implications of his words settled over the command center like a weight. How many threats had the humans dealt with over the centuries? How many times had galactic civilization been saved by warriors that most species believed were myths? Admiral, General Karthek interjected, our strategic analysts would like to understand your deployment of the replicating units. Are they self-limiting, or do we need to be concerned about them continuing to multiply indefinitely? Rodriguez's expression grew more serious. The Pandora units have built-in termination protocols that will activate in approximately 6 hours. They'll convert themselves into raw materials and drift harmlessly in space. We learned long ago that self-replicating weapons require very careful safeguards. Zilthara caught the implication. The humans had used these weapons before, probably many times. They had fought wars against self-replicating enemies and learned from the experience. While the Council species had been developing art and philosophy, humans had been perfecting the science of absolute destruction. Through the observation windows, she could see the cleanup operation beginning. Human salvage ships were collecting Devourer wreckage for analysis, their movements suggesting this was routine work rather than examination of an unknown enemy. The last few functional Devourer units were being systematically hunted down by human pursuit craft that moved through space like living predators. Admiral Rodriguez, Zilthara said finally, the Council would like to formalize relations with humanity. We clearly have much to learn from each other. The human admiral nodded slowly. That can be arranged, Ambassador. But understand this. Humanity didn't reveal itself to become part of your civilization. We revealed ourselves because you needed us. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and most species aren't equipped to handle the real threats that exist in the dark between stars. You're saying you'll continue to operate independently? We're saying we'll do what we've always done. Guard the darkness so that species like yours can live in the light. The only difference is that now you know we're out here. The transmission ended, leaving the Council leadership to contemplate a galaxy that had suddenly become far more complex than they had ever imagined. Somewhere in the void, humanity's ships were already disappearing back into the shadows, returning to their eternal vigil against threats that peaceful species couldn't even conceive of. The Deathworld species had saved the galaxy, and then vanished back into legend as quietly as they had emerged. 3 days after the Devourer War ended, Captain Sarah Chen found herself in the strangest situation of her military career, sitting in a diplomatic conference room aboard the Council's administrative station, trying to explain humanity's technology to beings who still used primitive energy weapons and chemical rockets for interstellar travel. The meeting had been Admiral Rodriguez's idea. Despite humanity's preference for operating in the shadows, the Devourer crisis had made it clear that the galaxy needed to understand at least some basic facts about human capabilities. The Council species were asking questions that couldn't be ignored, and their scientists were developing theories about human technology that were both wildly wrong and potentially dangerous. Ambassador Zilthara led the Council delegation, accompanied by their top military strategists and scientists. They had spent the past 3 days studying battle recordings and analyzing debris from the conflict, trying to understand how humanity had achieved such a decisive victory against an enemy that had crushed their combined fleets. Captain Chen, Dr. Veltar of the Scientific Consortium began, his multiple eyes focusing on her with intense curiosity. Our analysis of your weapon signatures suggests that you're manipulating quantum fields in ways that our physics models say should be impossible. How do your people achieve such precise control over subatomic forces? Sarah considered her response carefully. The truth was that human science had advanced far beyond anything the Council species had developed, primarily because humans had been forced to solve problems that peaceful civilizations never encountered. When your species evolved on a world where the weather could kill you and the wildlife was actively hostile, you learned to push the boundaries of what was possible. Doctor, she replied, human technology developed along different paths than yours. We faced challenges that required us to find solutions outside conventional physics. Our weapons don't just manipulate quantum fields. They operate using principles that exist in dimensions beyond normal space-time. The alien scientists exchanged glances that suggested they thought she was either lying or insane. General Karthek leaned forward in his chair, his military bearing evident despite the alien physiology. Captain, our tactical analysis suggests that your fleet was significantly larger than what our sensors detected. Are your ships equipped with some form of cloaking technology? Sarah nodded. Among other things, human vessels are designed to operate in hostile environments where detection means death. Our ships exist partially outside normal dimensional space, which makes them difficult for conventional sensors to track. What she didn't mention was that human ships could also phase shift through solid matter, manipulate local gravity, and travel through dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. The Council wasn't ready for those revelations yet. Ambassador Zilthera spoke up, her voice carrying a note of concern. Captain, we've been analyzing the wreckage of your replicating weapons, the Pandora units. Our scientists are deeply troubled by their sophistication. These aren't just self-replicating machines. They're self-evolving weapons that seem capable of adapting to any threat. That's correct, Sarah confirmed. The Pandora units are designed to fight enemies like the Devourers, threats that can adapt faster than conventional forces can respond. They're programmed to evolve their tactics and capabilities in real time. Dr. Veltar's voice carried a tremor of fear. Captain, do you understand the implications of such technology? Self-replicating, self-evolving weapons could theoretically consume an entire galaxy if they malfunctioned. Sarah looked directly at the alien scientist, her expression serious. Doctor, we understand the implications better than you might think. Humanity has been dealing with existential threats for our entire evolutionary history. We don't create weapons like the Pandora units lightly. They have multiple fail-safes, including genetic locks that prevent them from harming human life and temporal limiters that ensure they self-destruct after a predetermined period. The room fell silent as the aliens absorbed the implications of her words. Humanity didn't just possess weapons of mass destruction. They had created weapons that could potentially end all life in the galaxy, and they were confident enough in their safety protocols to actually use them. General Karthek broke the silence. Captain, there's one question that our strategic planning committee needs answered. The Devourers weren't the only ancient threat sleeping in the galaxy. Our archaeological surveys have identified at least a dozen other sites that show similar technological signatures. Are your people prepared to deal with additional awakening? Sarah smiled grimly. General, the Devourers were actually a relatively minor threat compared to some of the things we've dealt with over the centuries. If other ancient systems activate, humanity will handle them the same way we handled this one. She activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, marked with hundreds of red dots scattered throughout the spiral arms. These represent confirmed locations of dormant AI systems, rogue nanoswarm clusters, dimensional intrusions, and other Class Omega threats that humanity monitors continuously. We have contingency plans for all of them. The alien delegates stared at the display in shock. There were threats scattered throughout space that they had never even suspected, and humanity had been watching all of them for centuries. Ambassador Zilthera found her voice first. Captain, how many times has your species saved the galaxy without anyone knowing? Sarah considered the question seriously. In the past 500 years? Approximately 47 times, though most of those incidents were resolved before they could spread beyond a single star system, the Tai. Meeting room fell into stunned silence as the Council representatives realized that their peaceful civilization had only existed because humanity had been standing guard in the darkness, fighting wars that no one else even knew were happening. The Deathworld species had been protecting the galaxy all along. 1 year after the Devourer War, Ambassador Zilthera stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Galactic Defense Coordination Center, watching human and council ships conduct joint training exercises in the space around Proxima Centauri. The sight would have been unthinkable just months before. Sleek, council vessels with their elegant curves flying in formation alongside angular human warships that looked like they had been forged from starfire and nightmares. The past year had changed everything. The revelation that humanity had been silently protecting the galaxy for centuries had fundamentally altered how the council species viewed their place in the universe. They were no longer the dominant civilizations they had believed themselves to be. They were children playing in a garden that others had made safe for them. The integration process had been challenging. Human technology was so far advanced that council scientists were still struggling to understand the basic principles behind it. Human tactics were designed for fighting existential threats that most council species couldn't even imagine. And human culture, shaped by millennia of survival on Deathworlds, was fundamentally different from the peaceful philosophies that governed council society. But progress was being made. The joint training exercises were proof of that. Council forces were learning to coordinate with human units, and humans were adapting their tactics to work with less advanced allies. It wasn't perfect cooperation yet, but it was a beginning. Admiral Rodriguez had been appointed as the first human liaison to the Galactic Council, a position that required him to spend most of his time explaining why humanity couldn't simply share all of their advanced technology immediately, as he had told the Council leadership repeatedly. Giving quantum-dimensional weapons to species that still used chemical explosives would be like giving nuclear warheads to primitive tribes. The humans had agreed to a gradual technology transfer program, starting with basic defensive systems and working up to more advanced capabilities as council species demonstrated their ability to handle the responsibility. They had also established joint monitoring stations throughout the galaxy, where human and council forces could work together to watch for emerging threats. Zilthara turned as Admiral Rodriguez entered the observation deck, his expression carrying the weary satisfaction of someone who had spent the day in diplomatic meetings. Despite his fearsome appearance, she had come to appreciate his dry humor and surprising patience with council bureaucracy. "Admiral," she said, "the joint exercises appear to be proceeding successfully. Your Captain Kovac seems to be working well with General Karthek's tactical team." Rodriguez nodded, watching as a council heavy cruiser successfully coordinated with a human stealth frigate to eliminate a simulated threat. "Elena's good at adapting to new situations. That comes from growing up on Titan. When your environment can kill you in 50 different ways, you learn to be flexible." The mention of human death worlds still made Zilthera uncomfortable. She had read the reports on human colony worlds, places where the atmosphere was poison, the gravity could crush bones, and the weather patterns included phenomena like acid rain and electrical storms that could melt metal. The fact that humans not only survived in such places but thrived there explained much about their psychological makeup. "Admiral," she said carefully, "there's something the council leadership needs to discuss with you. Our long-range surveys have detected anomalous readings from the Andromeda galaxy. The signature matches some of the ancient threat patterns you've shown us." Rodriguez's expression grew more serious. "How long do we have?" "Our analysts estimate approximately 18 months before whatever it is reaches the galactic rim." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly running through tactical calculations. 18 months, he repeated. "That's enough time to prepare, but not enough to fully train council forces for what might be coming. We'll need to accelerate the integration program." Zilthara felt a familiar mixture of gratitude and unease. Once again, humanity would stand between the galaxy and destruction. But this time the council species wouldn't be completely helpless observers. They had spent the past year learning from human tactics and technology, and while they were still far behind human capabilities, they were no longer the defenseless civilians they had been during the Devourer crisis. Through the observation windows, she could see the joint training exercise reaching its conclusion. Council and human ships moved in perfect coordination, their different technologies complementing each other in ways that created new tactical possibilities. A hegemony dreadnought provided massive firepower support, while human stealth ships delivered precision strikes. Council sensor arrays gave human forces better battlefield awareness, while human defensive systems protected Council vessels from counterattack. "Admiral," Zilthara said, "regardless of what's coming from Andromeda, I want you to know that the Council is grateful for everything humanity has done. We understand now that our peaceful civilization was only possible because your people were willing to stand guard in the darkness." Rodriguez smiled, and for once it didn't remind her of a predator showing its teeth. "Ambassador, that's what we do. It's what we've always done. The only difference now is that we're not doing it alone anymore." On the tactical display, the joint exercise concluded with a perfect victory for the combined forces. Human and Council ships had worked together to eliminate the simulated threat, faster and more efficiently than either force could have managed alone. It was a small step, but it represented something unprecedented in galactic history. The peaceful species and the Deathworld warriors learning to fight side by side. As the ships returned to their bases, Zilthara allowed herself to feel a moment of hope. Whatever was coming from Andromeda would find a galaxy that was no longer divided between helpless civilians and hidden guardians. The children had grown up and they were ready to stand with their protectors against whatever darkness threatened the stars. The galaxy had learned to defend itself, and humanity was no longer alone in the shadows. Together they would face whatever came next as partners rather than strangers. The age of secret protection was ending, and the age of united defense was about to begin. The Deathworld species had finally found allies worthy of fighting beside them.